In 2023, the global pharmaceutical industry made over $1.4 trillion. At the same time, more than 60% of adults in the United States were taking at least one long-term prescription drug. Across Europe and Asia, that number keeps rising every year. Diabetes, heart disease, depression, chronic pain, these conditions don't disappear. They're kept stable. Medicine helps you get through today and turns illness into something that stays with you for life. Every morning starts the same way. One pill before breakfast, another after lunch, one more before bed. In the United States, adults over 50 take an average of 4 to 5 prescription drugs every day. In Europe, more than 40% of adults are on long-term medication for at least one chronic condition. In Japan, drug spending for the elderly accounts for nearly 40% of total healthcare costs, even though they make up just over a quarter of the population. No one calls this a crisis. They call it disease management. Life gets divided by prescriptions. Checkups every 90 days. Dosage adjustments. New drugs added when numbers drift. Others removed when side effects appear. For type 2 diabetes, over 90% of patients never fully stop medication. For hypertension, treatment often lasts decades. For depression, more than 50% of patients stay on medication for over 2 years. Many far longer, with no clear endpoint. On paper, this is treatment compliance. In real life, it is a loop. The pharmaceutical system does not need you to be cured to call this success. It only needs stable metrics, stable revenue, predictable cycles. These pills save lives every day. And at the same time, they lock illness into a controlled, manageable state. Quiet, unspectacular, steady. When taking medication becomes the most common daily habit on the planet, the question is no longer whether drugs work. The question is who they work for, and for how long. The scale of modern medicine is hard to see because it hides inside daily routines. Prescriptions, refills, insurance approvals. But once you pull the numbers together, the system becomes visible. In 2023, global pharmaceutical revenue passed $1.4 trillion. That is more than the GDP of many countries. By 2030, it is projected to exceed $2 trillion, driven mostly by drugs for chronic conditions, not cures. Chronic disease is now the dominant health category worldwide. According to the World Health Organization, non-communicable diseases account for roughly 74% of all global deaths each year. Cardiovascular disease alone kills over 20 million people annually. Diabetes affects more than 530 million adults, a number expected to rise sharply in the next decade. Depression and anxiety disorders impact hundreds of millions more, often requiring long-term medication rather than short treatment cycles. These are not rare illnesses. They are the statistical norm. The money follows that reality. In the United States, prescription drug spending exceeds $400 billion per year, with the majority going to long-term therapies. The top-selling drugs globally are not antibiotics that cure infections in days. They are treatments taken for years, sometimes decades. Drugs for diabetes, autoimmune disorders, cholesterol, cancer maintenance, and mental health dominate revenue rankings. A single blockbuster medication can generate $10 to $20 billion annually on its own, year after year. Europe follows a similar pattern. Aging populations mean higher rates of chronic illness and rising pharmaceutical dependence. In countries like Germany, France, and Italy, people over 65 consume a disproportionate share of prescription drugs. In Japan, where nearly 30% of the population is over 65, medication use per capita is among the highest in the world. Drug spending grows even when population growth slows. The system does not rely on more people. It relies on longer treatment timelines. Developing economies are not exempt. In China and India, urbanization and lifestyle changes have driven rapid increases in diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension. Pharmaceutical markets in Asia-Pacific are growing faster than those in North America and Europe. As incomes rise, long-term drug use expands. Access increases. So does dependency. What looks like progress on the surface also locks in future demand. One way to understand the scale is to compare pharmaceuticals with other global industries. Illegal drug trafficking is estimated to generate a few $100 billion per year worldwide. The legal pharmaceutical industry generates several times that amount every year, with state protection, patents, and institutional trust. Unlike illegal drugs, prescription medications are endorsed by doctors, subsidized by governments, and integrated into national health systems. The money flows quietly and predictably. Research spending reinforces this structure. Pharmaceutical companies invest tens of billions annually in research and development, but the distribution matters. Treatments that manage chronic conditions offer repeat customers. One-time cures do not. A therapy taken daily for life can be priced lower per dose and still outperform a single-use cure financially. Over time, this shapes research priorities, trial designs, and investment decisions. The system rewards predictability. Clinical trials reflect the same logic. Success is often defined as symptom reduction, improved biomarkers, or delayed progression, not elimination of disease. A drug that lowers blood sugar or stabilizes mood can be approved even if patients remain dependent on treatment indefinitely. From a regulatory standpoint, that is acceptable. From a financial standpoint, it is ideal. Insurance systems amplify the effect. In many countries, insurance readily covers maintenance medication but resists paying for newer, more expensive curative therapies. Long-term prescriptions fit existing reimbursement models. Cures disrupt them. As a result, healthcare budgets expand steadily, not suddenly. Costs rise year after year, spread across millions of patients who rarely notice the total. By the time all these layers overlap, aging populations, chronic disease prevalence, patent protections, insurance structures, and clinical definitions of success, the scale becomes undeniable. Medicine is no longer just a response to illness. It is a permanent economic pillar. Stable, predictable, expanding. And this scale is not accidental. It is the outcome of incentives that favor continuity over conclusion. The question is no longer whether the system works. The numbers say it does. The real question is what kind of health system grows best when illness never fully ends. The core paradox of modern medicine is simple to state and uncomfortable to sit with. The system is designed to improve health outcomes, but it performs best financially when illness does not fully end. This is not a conspiracy. It is an alignment of incentives. At the center of this paradox is the difference between curing a disease and managing it. A cure ends demand. Management sustains it. From a clinical perspective, both can be called success. From an economic perspective, they are not equal. A drug taken daily for 20 years will almost always outperform a one-time curative therapy in total revenue, even if the cure is priced higher up front. Patents formalize this logic. Pharmaceutical patents typically grant exclusivity for around 20 years from the filing date, but effective market exclusivity is often shorter due to development time. That window shapes strategy. A drug that treats a chronic condition can generate predictable revenue throughout the exclusivity period. A cure that permanently removes a patient from the market cannot. When investment committees decide where to allocate billions in research funding, predictability matters. This is visible in research pipelines. Chronic conditions like diabetes, autoimmune disorders, cholesterol management, and mental health receive sustained investment. These diseases affect large populations and require ongoing treatment. In contrast, research into definitive cures is riskier. Clinical failure ends the project. Clinical success can still disrupt future earnings. The system does not punish cures, but it does not reward them as consistently. Regulatory standards reinforce the same direction. Drug approval is often based on measurable improvements rather than elimination of disease. Lowering blood sugar, reducing blood pressure, stabilizing mood, slowing tumor progression, these endpoints are sufficient. They do not require patients to stop treatment. They require patients to remain compliant. Regulators approve what can be measured reliably. Markets reward what can be repeated. Clinical trials reflect this structure. Many trials are designed around surrogate endpoints, biomarkers that indicate improvement but not resolution. A drug can succeed if it shifts numbers in the right direction over months. Long-term outcomes are harder to measure, more expensive to track, and less attractive to investors. Shorter trials reduce cost and speed approval. Chronic treatment fits that model. Insurance systems then complete the loop. Reimbursement frameworks are built around ongoing care. Monthly prescriptions, annual renewals, tiered formularies. These systems spread costs over time, making them politically and socially manageable. A one-time curative therapy, even if cost-effective over decades, appears expensive up front. Insurers hesitate. Negotiations stall. Meanwhile, maintenance drugs flow through existing channels with little friction. This is why some of the most profitable drugs in history are not cures. They are controllers. Cholesterol-lowering statins, insulin analogs, biologics for autoimmune diseases, antidepressants. These drugs do not remove disease from the population. They normalize living with it. From the system's perspective, that is stability. The paradox becomes clearer when you look at outcomes over time. Life expectancy increases. Mortality rates decline for certain conditions. At the same time, the prevalence of chronic illness rises. People live longer, but fewer people live without diagnosis. Health becomes a managed state rather than a baseline. Being stable replaces being healthy. This does not require malicious intent. Doctors follow guidelines. Researchers pursue funded projects. Companies respond to markets. Regulators enforce existing standards. Each actor behaves rationally within their role. The result is a system that optimizes for continuity. Illness becomes something to be controlled, measured, and monetized indefinitely. Even language reflects this shift. Patients are described as responding to treatment rather than recovering. Conditions are under control rather than resolved. Success is defined by adherence, not independence. The expectation of an endpoint quietly disappears. The paradox is not that medicine fails to cure. It is that curing is no longer the default objective. Management is safer. Management is scalable. Management aligns with patents, insurance, regulation, and revenue models. A cure disrupts all of them at once. When viewed this way, the growth of chronic disease is not just a medical issue. It is a structural one. A system built to manage illness will produce more managed illness. Not because it intends to harm, but because it functions best that way. The numbers confirm it. Spending rises. Lifelong prescriptions increase. Research priorities narrow. And the idea of being fully cured begins to sound unrealistic, even unnecessary. That is the paradox at the heart of modern medicine. The system works. It just works best when the patient never fully leaves. The pharmaceutical system does not announce itself. It does not need to. It works quietly, through routines that feel normal. A doctor's visit, a prescription pad, an insurance form, a refill reminder. No single step looks predatory. Together, they form a machine that rarely stops. It begins long before a patient appears. Drug development starts in laboratories where investment decisions are made years in advance. Of the thousands of compounds tested, only a small fraction ever reach clinical trials, and fewer still receive approval. Each step costs money. Phase 1, 2, and 3 trials can take a decade and cost over $1 to $2 billion per successful drug when failures are included. This cost structure shapes priorities. Companies favor conditions with large patient populations and long treatment timelines. Chronic disease fits both. Clinical trials define success narrowly. A drug does not need to eliminate disease. It needs to show measurable improvement over a defined period. Lower cholesterol, reduced blood glucose, fewer depressive episodes, slower tumor growth. These endpoints are quantifiable and repeatable. They also align with ongoing treatment. A trial that proves long-term independence from medication would require years of follow-up. It would be expensive, slow, and risky. Most trials are not designed that way. Once approved, the drug enters a tightly regulated but commercially optimized path. Marketing does not target patients directly in many countries. It targets physicians. Sales representatives provide data summaries, sponsored education, and guideline updates. This is legal. It is normalized. In the United States alone, pharmaceutical companies spend tens of billions of dollars annually on marketing and promotion, much of it aimed at prescribers. Guidelines play a central role. Medical associations issue treatment protocols based on available evidence. These documents shape how doctors practice. They determine first-line therapies, escalation steps, and maintenance strategies. Once a drug becomes embedded in guidelines, it becomes standard care. Deviating from it requires justification. Following it offers protection. The system rewards compliance. Doctors are not villains in this process. Most follow guidelines to reduce risk and provide accepted care. Time pressure reinforces this behavior. In many healthcare systems, appointments last 10 to 15 minutes. There is limited space to explore alternative strategies, lifestyle interventions, or long-term tapering plans. Prescribing is faster. Refilling is easier. The machine favors speed. Insurance systems reinforce the same flow. Formularies determine which drugs are covered and at what cost. Chronic medications are often placed on predictable tiers. Monthly copays normalize long-term use. Prior authorization processes discourage deviation. A doctor can prescribe within the system and move on. Fighting the system consumes time and resources. Most do not. Once a patient begins treatment, the loop tightens. Regular monitoring creates data. Data justifies continuation. Side effects lead to additional prescriptions. Drug interactions require adjustment. Each problem generates another solution within the same framework. Polypharmacy becomes common. In older populations, taking 5 or more medications simultaneously is routine. Each pill addresses a symptom created by another. Globally, the structure repeats. In Europe, national health systems negotiate prices but still prioritize maintenance therapies due to budget stability. In Japan, an aging population drives sustained prescription volumes, supported by regular reimbursement revisions. In emerging markets, expanding access to healthcare introduces populations into the same long-term treatment models. The machine scales across borders. Patents and exclusivity periods protect revenue during peak years. Even after patents expire, reformulations, combination therapies, and incremental innovations extend profitability. A slightly modified dosage, a new delivery mechanism, a revised indication. Each change can reset parts of the cycle. Generics reduce price but not dependency. Volume compensates for margin. Data systems close the loop. Electronic health records track adherence. Insurers monitor utilization. Outcomes are measured in control, not resolution. A stable patient is a successful metric. A cured patient disappears from the dataset. The system does not register absence as success. It registers ongoing engagement. None of this requires coordination behind closed doors. Each actor responds to incentives in front of them. Researchers seek funding. Companies seek return on investment. Doctors seek safety and efficiency. Insurers seek predictability. Regulators seek measurable standards. Patients seek relief. The machine emerges from alignment, not intent. What makes it invisible is familiarity. Prescription renewals feel routine. Long-term treatment feels responsible. Chronic illness feels normal. Over time, expectations adjust. Patients do not ask when treatment will end. They ask whether the dosage needs to change. Health becomes maintenance. The machine does not eliminate disease. It stabilizes it. It does not promise an endpoint. It promises management. And because it delivers that promise consistently, it earns trust. Trust keeps the system running. This is why disruption is rare. A cure would break multiple links at once. It would challenge trial design, reimbursement models, guidelines, and revenue forecasts. The machine is not built for abrupt endings. It is built for continuity. By the time the patient notices the pattern, it feels too late to exit. Stopping medication carries risk. Reducing dosage raises alarms. Stability becomes fragile. The safest option is to continue. That is how the invisible machine works. Quietly, legally, predictably. It does not force illness to exist. It simply makes living with illness the path of least resistance. And once a system makes illness manageable, measurable, and profitable, it has no internal reason to let it end. The consequences of this system do not appear all at once. They spread geographically, clinically, and socially. Different regions experience different symptoms, but the pattern remains consistent. Chronic treatment expands. Dependency deepens. Costs accumulate. In the United States, the map is easiest to read. Chronic disease is the backbone of healthcare spending. More than 90% of the $4.5 trillion annual healthcare expenditure is linked to chronic and mental health conditions. Diabetes alone costs the U.S. economy over $400 billion per year when direct medical expenses and lost productivity are combined. Insulin use continues to rise, even as lifestyle-related diabetes becomes more common. Prices fluctuate, access changes, but dependency remains constant. Patients rarely exit the system. They age inside it. Mental health tells a similar story. Antidepressant use in the U.S. has more than doubled since the early 2000s. Millions of patients remain on medication for years, often without a defined endpoint. Discontinuation rates are low. Relapse risk is high. Long-term safety data remains incomplete. The outcome is not recovery. It is stabilization. The system records success. Patients record permanence. In Europe, the pattern shifts slightly, but the destination is the same. National health systems absorb the cost, making long-term medication feel less visible at the individual level. In the United Kingdom, over 1 in 4 adults takes at least one prescription drug regularly. In countries with aging populations, like Italy and Germany, polypharmacy is common among the elderly. 5, 6, 7 medications daily. Each prescription justified. Each continuation reasonable. Together, they create long-term dependence supported by public budgets that expand quietly year after year. Japan offers a more extreme version. With nearly 30% of its population over the age of 65, Japan consumes some of the highest volumes of prescription drugs per capita in the world. Regular checkups, frequent prescriptions, and routine adjustments are built into the healthcare culture. Elderly patients often visit clinics monthly. Medication use becomes part of social structure. Longevity increases. Medication dependence scales with it. The system sustains life. It also normalizes permanent treatment. In emerging economies, the map looks newer but grows faster. In China, the number of adults living with diabetes has surpassed 140 million, the highest in the world. Hypertension and cardiovascular disease rise alongside urbanization. Pharmaceutical markets in Asia-Pacific grow at some of the fastest rates globally. Increased access to healthcare brings relief, but also introduces long-term drug dependence to populations previously untreated. Chronic illness does not disappear with development. It expands with it. India shows the same tension. As healthcare access improves, long-term medication use increases sharply. Affordable generics reduce cost per dose, but volume compensates. Millions begin lifelong treatment for conditions once undiagnosed. The system scales through quantity rather than price. Dependency remains the constant. Autoimmune diseases mark another region on the map. Biologic drugs used to manage conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and inflammatory bowel disease can cost tens of thousands of dollars per patient per year. These drugs do not cure. They suppress immune response. Patients often stay on them indefinitely. When treatment stops, symptoms return. The body becomes dependent on external regulation. The market becomes stable. Cancer treatment introduces a darker layer. Advances in oncology have improved survival, but maintenance therapy has become common. Patients live longer with cancer controlled rather than eliminated. Oral cancer drugs taken daily generate ongoing revenue. A patient who survives 5 extra years on maintenance therapy represents both medical progress and financial continuity. The system celebrates survival rates. It rarely discusses lifetime cost. Antibiotics reveal the long-term damage. Decades of widespread use have driven antimicrobial resistance. The result is a shrinking arsenal against infection. New antibiotics are expensive to develop and less profitable to sell because they are ideally used sparingly. The market fails where restraint is required. Resistance spreads. The map extends into the future. Across all these regions and diseases, the human experience converges. Treatment becomes routine. Dependency feels normal. Patients measure life in refill intervals. Health becomes something to maintain, not restore. The destruction is not immediate. It is cumulative. Families absorb costs. Public budgets stretch. Side effects accumulate. Drug interactions multiply. Older patients lose physiological resilience. Younger patients begin lifelong medication earlier. The system grows heavier with time. What makes this map difficult to see is that it lacks a single disaster. There is no collapse, no explosion, just a steady expansion of managed illness. Each prescription is justified, each continuation rational. The harm appears only when viewed at scale. By the time policymakers notice, the system is too large to reverse easily. Removing long-term medication without alternatives risks instability. Introducing cures disrupts budgets and markets. The safest path is continuation. That is how the damage spreads. Quietly. Region by region. Disease by disease. Pill by pill. This is not a failure of medicine. It is the outcome of a system optimized for management. And once management becomes the default, ending disease stops being the priority. The map is already drawn. Most people live inside it. Few realize how difficult it is to leave. The patient did everything right. The diagnosis came early. Treatment began immediately. The guidelines were followed. The prescriptions were filled on time. Every appointment was kept. Every lab result was tracked. On paper, this was a success story. The condition was chronic. That was never hidden. The goal was control, stability, normal function. And by every measurable standard, the treatment worked. Blood markers improved. Symptoms reduced. Hospital visits became rare. The patient returned to work. Life resumed. The system delivered what it promised. Years passed. The medication list grew longer, not shorter. One drug to manage the condition, another to counter side effects, a third to protect long-term organs under strain. Each addition was justified, each adjustment reasonable. No single doctor made a mistake. No rule was broken. By year 5, the patient was considered well managed. By year 10, stable. By year 15, dependent. Stopping treatment was never discussed as a real option. Every attempt to reduce dosage triggered warning signs. Numbers drifted. Symptoms returned. The solution was always the same. Resume treatment. Increase slightly. Monitor closely. Stability returned. From the system's perspective, this was ideal. No emergency care. No hospitalizations. Predictable costs. Predictable outcomes. High adherence. Low risk. From the patient's perspective, life became conditional. Travel required planning around medication schedules. Employment choices depended on insurance coverage. Missed doses carried consequences. Every refill reminder reinforced the same message. Continuation equals safety. Globally, this pattern repeats millions of times. For type 2 diabetes, fewer than 1 in 10 patients achieve sustained remission without medication once treatment begins. For hypertension, long-term drug use often extends 20 to 30 years. For autoimmune diseases treated with biologics, discontinuation rates are low because symptom rebound is severe. The body adapts. The system adjusts. The loop tightens. Mental health reveals the same structure. Many patients who attempt to taper antidepressants experience withdrawal or relapse. Studies show that relapse rates increase significantly after discontinuation, even after years of treatment. The conclusion is framed carefully. Maintenance reduces risk. The implication is clear. Stopping is dangerous. The climax is not a moment of collapse. It is a realization. The patient was never expected to exit. The system does not measure success by independence. It measures stability. A patient who no longer requires care disappears from metrics. A patient who returns every 3 months strengthens them. Survival, not resolution, becomes the benchmark. This realization arrives quietly. There is no announcement, no betrayal, just a shift in expectation. The question changes from, when will I be cured, to, how long can this remain stable? At that moment, the patient understands the trade. Life continues, but on terms set by medication schedules, insurance coverage, and monitoring protocols. Health becomes a managed condition rather than a natural state. There is no villain in this story. The doctor followed evidence. The company produced an effective drug. The insurer covered it. The regulator approved it. Each decision was defensible in isolation. Together, they created permanence. The true climax is not personal tragedy. It is systemic clarity. The system does not need patients to recover fully. It needs them to remain manageable, predictable, compliant. A patient who lives 30 extra years on medication is counted as a triumph. The lifetime cost is distributed across decades, hidden in monthly charges, absorbed by individuals and public budgets alike. The total rarely enters conversation. When the patient asks about alternatives, the answer's narrow. Lifestyle changes help, but not enough. New therapies exist, but access is limited. Experimental cures are distant. Risk increases outside the protocol. The safest path is to continue. And so the patient continues, not because of deception, because every signal points in that direction. Stability feels like success. Dependency feels responsible. The absence of crisis feels like health. That is the climax of modern medicine. Not a dramatic failure, but a quiet alignment. A system that saves lives while ensuring those lives remain inside it. No alarms sound. No rules are broken. The machine does exactly what it was built to do. And by the time the patient understands this, leaving no longer feels like an option. The collapse does not arrive as a single event. It unfolds slowly, disguised as normalcy. There is no moment when the system breaks. It simply becomes too heavy to change. At the individual level, long-term medication reshapes the body itself. Prolonged drug use alters metabolism, hormone regulation, immune response, and neurological balance. Side effects accumulate quietly. Liver stress, kidney strain, cardiovascular risk, cognitive dulling. Each effect is monitored, documented, and managed with additional medication. The body adapts to chemical support, and natural regulation weakens. Over time, stopping treatment becomes physiologically difficult, not just psychologically risky. Polypharmacy accelerates the process. In aging populations, taking 5 or more prescription drugs daily is no longer exceptional. Drug interactions increase the likelihood of adverse events, falls, confusion, organ damage. These outcomes are recorded as complications, not consequences of system design. Treatment continues. At the family level, dependency spreads outward. Care routines become permanent. Financial planning revolves around insurance coverage and medication costs. Choices about work, relocation, and retirement narrow. Chronic illness does not only affect patients. It restructures households. The burden is shared, but never evenly. Public systems absorb the next layer of collapse. Healthcare budgets expand year after year, driven primarily by long-term treatment costs. In high-income countries, chronic and mental health conditions account for the majority of healthcare spending. In lower-income countries, rising chronic disease threatens to overwhelm systems originally designed for acute care. Resources are diverted from prevention and public health toward maintenance and control. The labor market feels the impact. A population living longer but less healthy works fewer productive years. Absenteeism increases. Disability claims rise. Early retirement becomes common. The economy adjusts expectations downward. Chronic illness becomes a background condition of modern life. Antibiotic resistance marks a more visible fracture. Decades of widespread use have reduced effectiveness. Infections once easily treated now require stronger drugs, longer hospital stays, and higher costs. New antibiotics are scarce because they are unprofitable when used responsibly. The system that rewards volume undermines restraint. The future inherits weaker defenses. Mental health reveals another dimension of collapse. Long-term psychotropic medication alters emotional baselines. Withdrawal becomes difficult. Relapse risk increases. Patients cycle through stability and breakdown without clear resolution. The system manages symptoms but struggles to restore resilience. The cost is measured in lost potential rather than mortality statistics. At the societal level, expectations shift. Being healthy no longer means being free of illness. It means being monitored, medicated, and compliant. Diagnostic thresholds lower. New conditions are defined. Treatment populations expand. Each expansion is justified individually. Collectively, they redefine normal life. Innovation slows where disruption is costly. Radical cures challenge reimbursement models, budgets, and market forecasts. Incremental improvements fit more easily. A drug that slightly improves outcomes while maintaining long-term use is safer than a cure that upends everything. The system evolves toward stability, not resolution. The collapse becomes structural. Once a society organizes healthcare around permanent treatment, reversing course risks destabilization. Removing long-term medication without alternatives increases short-term harm. Investing in prevention requires delayed returns. Policymakers choose continuity. What collapses is not healthcare delivery. It continues efficiently. What collapses is the possibility of exit. The idea that illness can end rather than be managed fades from expectation. Patients plan for lifelong treatment. Systems budget for it. Markets price it in. This collapse has no villain and no clear endpoint. It is the logical outcome of incentives layered over decades. Each decision rational. Each step defensible. Together, irreversible. By the time the cost becomes undeniable, the structure is too large to dismantle quickly. Change threatens instability. Stability demands continuation. The system protects itself by appearing necessary. The result is a society that lives longer, medicated, and dependent. Health becomes an ongoing project rather than a state to be achieved. Illness remains present, controlled, and profitable. The collapse is not dramatic. It is administrative. And because it arrives quietly, most people never realize it is happening. They simply adapt. It always ends where it began. With a pill. Small. Familiar. Taken without thought. For most people, it sits beside a toothbrush or a glass of water. It marks the start of the day, or the end of it. No alarms. No urgency. Just routine. Modern medicine did not fail. It did what it promised. People live longer. Fewer die suddenly. Conditions that once killed now linger. Survival rates rise. Emergency rooms grow quieter. On the surface, this looks like progress. But beneath that surface, something else changed. Illness stopped being an interruption. It became a permanent setting. Health turned into a managed state, measured by numbers that stay within acceptable ranges. Blood sugar controlled. Blood pressure lowered. Mood stabilized. Not cured. Not finished. Just contained. The system adapted around that idea. Research focused on maintenance. Guidelines normalized continuation. Insurance spread costs over time. Patients learned to comply. Stability became the goal because stability could be planned, priced, and monitored. No one needed to say it out loud. The expectation shifted quietly. People stopped asking when treatment would end. They asked whether it was still working. Across the world, the pattern repeated. In wealthy countries, long-term medication became routine. In developing ones, it arrived as progress. Different systems. Same outcome. More people living with diagnoses. Fewer people living without them. The pill remained at the center. It represented safety, control, responsibility. Skipping it felt reckless. Questioning it felt dangerous. Dependence stopped feeling like dependence and started feeling like care. What disappeared was the idea of an exit. A cure is an ending. Endings are disruptive. They erase demand, collapse projections, and force systems to reconfigure. Management does the opposite. It extends timelines, smooths costs, keeps everything predictable. Predictability became the highest value. So the system did not move toward resolution. It moved toward permanence. Not because it wanted illness, but because permanence fit better than conclusion. It was safer, more reliable, easier to defend. The result is a world where being healthy means staying inside the system, where success is defined by adherence, where independence looks risky, where stability replaces recovery as the standard. This is not a warning. It is a description. Medicine still saves lives. It saves them every day. But it also reshapes what living well means. It turns survival into a long-term arrangement rather than a return to baseline. The pill remains. Taken daily. quietly, efficiently. It does not announce its presence. It does not promise an end. And when a system is built to manage illness instead of eliminating it, the question is no longer how long people will live. The question is whether living without treatment is still part of the plan. Silence follows that question, not because there is no answer, but because the system does not need one. It just needs you to keep taking the pill.